Welcome back to another episode of Business Journey Unlocked. Today I'm joined by Chris Weldon, one of the founders of Endurance Home Care. Chris and his partners built this non-medical home care agency driven by the family experience of caring for his grandmother. This mission is now focused on setting a new standard for dignity and care. Endurance delivers personalized holistic care plans, combining wellness program, medical coordination, and optimal 24/7 remote monitoring. This approach ensures exceptional tech-enabled services. Chris, I'm very, very excited to have you here. I know you explain yourself far better than I ever could, so please take it away from here.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. In a nutshell, what we sell is peace of mind to families. Um, and it's a very basic idea. I experienced firsthand what it was like to be a caregiver, but from afar. So, I had my family member, my grandmother in this case, I was power of attorney for. She lived 3,000 miles away from me. And so had to figure out how to manage her life as she aged. And so, we experienced, 90 plus excellent years, and then COVID hit. And, the lack of socialization and the lack of for just normal routine really affected her. And so, she had some probably early onset dementia, which manifests later into Alzheimer's, largely because she was inside and she just couldn't use her body and brain the way that previously
Yeah.
she had. And it was really sad watching it happen. But we experienced the entire continuum of care from, um, you know, having to manage doctors when you're not in the office and not in the room, having private caregivers, having an agency and a registry, trying assisted living, trying memory care, having her get kicked out because she was a flight risk, and just realizing that there's, especially for people like myself, who I'm in my early 40s and I'm caring for somebody who's much older, while I'm caring for my children, it's a very complicated process, and one where you're dealing with insurance, and you're dealing with, estate planning, and you're dealing with just a lot of questions. And in my case, it was somewhat simplistic because I was the sole decision maker. But often we come to things where there's many family members and there's a lot of different decisions, a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So going through that process, I think, was formative, coupled with meeting somebody who was sort of had a similar background to me, which I'll go into in just a moment. He was previously in the finance world, moved into home care world,
Mhm.
and really, kind of explained to me the unit economics behind the business, which was one of the reasons I was also excited about the opportunity. So I think, um, whenever I see something that is complicated, in this case, service business that is really selling peace of mind, but if you get into the nitty gritty, it's quite complex. I sort of say, this good, as good as it gets, right? Or can I make something better, right? And I think that the way that we've built Endurance is demonstrably better than any other care that's happening where we are in Connecticut or a lot of other places, because we've really taken a holistic approach, where it's not just a warm body and a companion who maybe cooks and cleans for you, but you get the oversight of really talented nurses. You get remote AI monitoring, which is a game changer when it comes to being able to administer care that's higher quality, because you actually have the ability to have perfect data on every cough, every time someone uses the restroom, every time somebody's fallen or has issues, where they were fearful or depressed. You have so much more information in the modern world uh, to be able to use to build care plans. So, going through the process that I went through caring for my grandmother, I just saw a lot of deficiencies. And so the idea behind Endurance was to offer a better product at a reasonable price. And, it's a rapidly growing market, because we have 10,000 new baby boomers every single day, and we will for many years ahead. So we have, much like Japan, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, or Germany in the last 15 years, we have a population that's sort of rapidly aging, and there's a massive amount of need. And it really just becomes down to um, the family's economic situation, as well as what they're willing to bear, because a lot of the state programs are not the most appealing if you have been in nursing homes or you've been dealing with Medicaid. So there are some that can afford what we do. We do private pay right now. But we also are expanding into the medical side of the business with private nursing, PT, OT, speech therapy. We're expanding geographically. We've grown very, very rapidly because our calling card is incredibly high quality service. When I built my hedge fund, when I built some of my retail businesses, my manufacturing businesses, food and beverage stuff that I've done, it's all been just high quality service, like just being extremely adaptable, flexible, and client first, and just listening and trying to really interpret and understand what the problems are that people are trying to solve when they contact you. Be willing to think differently and just be able to solve problems instead of saying, well, this is the way it's done, or this is this regimented kind of rule book. That's not the way the world works. You need customization, and we need people to think with the voice of the customer in mind.
I completely commend what you do. I was in a similar situation, so I can completely connect with you. My grandfather, he had a lot of ailments, and this was my second year of college. So what I did was I spoke to my school, and my grandparents live in Florida. I'm based in New Jersey, and I was at school in Rhode Island. So I talked to my school and I said, "Hey, this is the situation. I want to go down, help my grandfather because he had a lot of ailments. As I mentioned, he had Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. So it was very, very difficult, and I can understand your point of view. It's you trying everything you can, right? And it's a very different situation from you because you were 3,000 miles away. You weren't actively there trying to help out. Like you were doing the best you could in your situation. And given that plate, it is very hard. I mean, naturally, it's hard seeing anybody, not just your family members, but anybody going into that kind of similar state. And what you try to do, you try to help not only alleviate the situation, but do the best things in your power, given the resource you have. And it is a very, like you said, complex, very difficult model because, like you mentioned, 10,000 people a day, right? And it's just as long as you're expanding and growing and kind of understanding the market and going from there, that's all that matters. It's just one step at a time. Like, okay, I solved this, let's go on to this. And as you mentioned, the different programs you're implementing too, you're not just focused on one thing, you're focused on the whole spectrum, which is it's amazing. And I really do like that. So given everything that's going on with in your team, what's like the biggest problems you kind of see on a daily basis? Like, is there a certain field in your line of work that you understand and acknowledge that this is more concerning as opposed to others?
I don't want to make this seem like it's easy because it's not. We're very well capitalized. We've started a number of companies before. I wouldn't say there's anything uniquely complicated about what we're doing today. I think it's just a matter of time, to be honest with you. It's just a lot of people, if you think about the buying process for this service, often the person whom is doing the inquiry and trying to research things is uh, I'll call it a 40 to 65-year-old. Probably 80% of the time it's females, 20% of the time it's males, right? And a lot of times it's the eldest daughter who's trying to research things. And they are many of them are not in the medical profession. Those who are know how to navigate things, just because they've lived it themselves. And so then they start to ask all the questions that you might expect, right? Like, does it commercial insurance pay for this? Does Medicare pay for this? Does Medicaid pay for this? A lot of people, for good or for bad, I was just talking to my neighbor whom is caring for some of her in-laws. Everybody kind of has this mentality when you're an adult and you have children. Okay, I'm going to save for college. I might save for a wedding. But she said something very interesting to me, which is like, I never knew I was going to have to save for my parents' elder last 5 or 10 years, or my in-laws for the last 5 or 10 years. So I think the biggest issue, it's not about our company, it's just about like, how do people um, plan and finance the last couple of years of life? Now, a lot of people save for many, many years, and they have a fair amount of retirement savings. They have home equity. They have other things like that. But I think the biggest issue writ large when it comes to the whole healthcare system is, as people age, as you can imagine, their healthcare spend is asymptotically, spent, meaning that it gets, more and more and more expensive. And I think that uh, there's also, in general, um, there's a lot of people that they want to grit their teeth and do it themselves, right? They're like, look, my mother took care of me. I take care of my mother or my father or what have you. And that makes a lot of sense. And of course, culturally, I think in certain communities, that is, you know, sort of presupposed that people are going to do that. In the modern world, um, people work a lot longer. Men and women work. So it's not like there's a natural just caregiver at home all the time. People are, people are very focused on their own lives. They're focused on their children, right? And so I think it's just so challenging for people when they're torn in multiple directions, right? Where they have work, they have their children, and now they have to care for parents. They call it the sandwich generation, right? So I think the financeability of aging is challenging, and then the burden it places on the caregiver or the person making the decisions is very significant, because let's say you're in Parkinson's or dementia, Alzheimer's, or whatever. You're so used to this person being a role model and somebody who you love and respect, and you've seen them be successful their entire life. And then as we age, it's you want to age with dignity, but like certain things, if you're, God forbid, you're incontinent or you have issues, bring to a shower or what have you, right? There's just certain things that happen as you age that nobody really is ready for. And as a adult child, um, you don't really want to remember your parents that way per se. You sort of want to remember them as they once were, and so there's this desire to have great care, but not necessarily administer the great care. And therein lies where we sit. We can take a lot of that responsibility onto ourselves, and because we do it all the time, we know what to expect. We have a very good sense for what the evolution is of care over time, because it changes, right? And it's obviously, you might have just companionship initially, meaning that like you're just there to talk to them and keep them stimulated, because when you're aged, for good or for bad, a lot of your friends and family, they're no longer there anymore, right? And so you're just trying to kind of stimulate them. And but then as you get older and things break down, you need a lot more help being mobilized, because often you're immobile, and that's a whole nother world, right? And so you're dealing with a different kettle of worms, and then as a result of that, maybe you're not able to socialize as much, and then your mind starts to slip. And so there's this kind of arc, if you will, that like very few people have experienced when they're younger. By definition, they're not experiencing it. And so that's what we specialize in, understanding that arc, trying to help the families. And I think, to go into all of that, I think one of the things that we really focus on, and this is something that we're going to be focusing on for the next 2 decades, is how do we reduce the cost of care through technology, right? How do we improve the quality of care through technology? Because this is an industry where, um, there isn't a lot of innovation. There's some in biotech in terms of the pharmacological, pieces of care. But if you go into a hospital, or if you go into a lot of places, they may have very fancy, MRI machines. They may have some, kind of new, interesting technology every so often, but it's still very candidly, it's stuff that was existed 30 or 50 years ago very often. And so there hasn't been a lot of disruption. And also when it comes to what we do, which is more of a, you know, consumer friendly type of care in terms of the care system, there isn't a lot of great service, to be honest with you. And so you're lacking some technology, you're lacking some service, and it's expensive for a lot of people. And so it's really not fair to people to ask as much as people ask if you're not going to give them like A plus plus service. And it's also not fair to ask them sometimes to pay for care that might be far more than they need. And so that's where we can supplement things with smart technologies. And that's really what our one of our key focuses are. It's just how do we help people manage so that they don't just have funds for a year, but they have it for 5 or 10 years, and or however long they need to have it last. Because I think that's the most challenging process. Like, people just don't know
Right.
if you're 85, you're going to live to 100, or are you going to live to 87? So you have to always plan at that point in time. So
I find that is a very good approach. You're trying to implement technology in order to reduce the cost. Because as you mentioned, not a lot of people think of that point of life. They think of everything else, but leading into that, they just never think twice. Because granted, we're humans. We think we're unstoppable. We think we're invincible. But at the end of the day, we're not. We're humans, right? We break down. We break bones, and it obviously depends on how we care for ourselves, right? If you look on nutrition. Now, in my generation, for example, nutrition is like a very important thing. I'm not saying it wasn't important, 40 years ago, but given the new research we have now, it just opens the eye on a lot of things, right? So I think that's one of the biggest things, or yeah, I would say one of the biggest things as why, and also the genetics too, right? You understand that, but it's very expensive. It's very time consuming too, and just understanding how your approach and how we can try to alleviate not only the burden but also the financial costs as well. I think that's an excellent approach, and I hope other caregivers, care agencies are implementing that same approach. Because looking at technology 10 years from now, it's going to be way different than it is now. I mean, you mentioned AI, right? AI is constantly evolving every single day, right? And just having that approach in your monitoring, getting that real data, because we can't be with them 24/7, but having that monitoring, understanding the data gives you a clearer picture on what exactly they might be doing when you're not there. So, looking back on when you first started, what was kind of the biggest challenges you had trying to get that initial momentum? Because going into the United States, there's a lot of different home care agencies. What sets you apart from everybody else?
I'll start with the latter question because, you know, I think that's probably the most interesting. Um, yeah. So look, there's many things that set us apart from other people, but I'm going to start with just the most basic thing, which is coming at it as a customer,
Mhm.
right? If you have not consumed the product and you're only selling the product, I think you're missing the point to some extent, right? Because as a consumer, what I recognized very quickly was that this is a super luxury product, meaning that if you're doing private pay home care, you know, you should have certain expectations, not just somebody who's going to show up and, kind of cook them food and maybe, take them for a walk. But like, it's more about like, if, for example, in my case, I was multiple thousands of miles away. I needed somebody to be able to take somebody to doctor's appointments, have them to, understand what the doctor is prescribing, come back to me and, come with thoughtful, like, hey, like, this seems, like this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, right? And it was sort of more than just needing a, person whom was going to go grocery shopping, right? So I think coming at it and recognizing that a lot of people that are not medically trained, um, even when they're in the doctor's office and they're hearing, the cardiologist, the primary care physician, or whomever neurologist, they have no idea what they're saying. You almost need somebody to interpret for you and put it into English, right? And then so I think that so starting as a customer and then sort of reverse engineering and saying, okay, like what would it be like to receive our pitch, of why we're different, and that's what I kind of was saying earlier. There's really three key things that I point to in terms of our service that are different, right? And then there's just in terms of our strategy that are very different. So from our service, um, some of the biggest issues, if we just, we don't have great information and data when we're not living with our loved one. Obviously, if you lived with your mother or your father and you're caring for them, you would have great information. And that probably is a third of the population, maybe even less, maybe 20 to 35%, something in that vicinity that lives. So let's put those people aside. But otherwise, if you're just hearing what your parents are saying to you, they have an ego. They don't want to tell you what's really happening. If they've fallen, if they've soiled themselves, if they have an issue, they're not going to tell you because they don't want to lose their independence, right? So we needed something to bridge that gap of information and experience, because you're not there physically, right? And even if you have a caregiver there, maybe they're only there 4 hours a day, 8 hours a day. Are they really 24 hours? So we started with, how do we improve that situation? And that's where the AI really, really improves things. So we have endurance technology solutions where we install hardware in our home, basically like almost like a Alexa or Google Home that's HIPAA compliant in all the key areas of the home. Um, and we're able to pick up 200 medical anomalies, and what those either break into preventative anomalies. So things that, we can say, like, for example, if somebody has been going to the bathroom, 2 times throughout the evening, between, let's say, midnight and 6 a.m., and now they've gone 8 times. Well, there's probably something wrong, right? So we can actually pick up an early UTI. And if we can get there early enough before it affects their brain, because it very often presents as dementia or something, cognitive decline, that's a really big quality of life improvement. Because instead of going down like, the door, which is, oh my gosh, I need more, dementia meds, it's, I just need an antibiotic for my bladder. Very, very different, right? So that's a preventative care issue. We've also picked up crazily early warning signs of cancer, and had a patient received surgery within I want to say almost 96 hours of us coming up with the alerts, if you will, running over there with our nurse, putting them into the ER, having them get removed from the ER because they said that they were fine, just being discharged. We brought them back to the ER, sat there with them, and said, "This, something is not right." And being able to do that was really a function of the technology, and that technology is just improving every single day, and we're adding more and more, vitals management in the cloud, all sorts of fall detectors, and so we just believe that technology was going to improve everything that we do. So that's the first thing. That's a big differentiating factor. A lot of people don't even think to add technology because this is such an antiquated business model. Second one is, you mentioned early on that this is non-medical, and I think the state and many others are very sensitive to medical versus non-medical, and I understand why. There's been a lot of graft, a lot of fraud. Um, but the reality of the situation is, like, while it's not medical to feed somebody daily, not medical to bathe somebody daily or brush their teeth, those are technically considered non-medical. Those are personal care. Somebody who doesn't do that, they can't even take their medications, because they don't have, they don't have the presence of mind. They don't have the foundation to even do any of the medical stuff. They can't do PT. They can't do OT or speech therapy or go see their physician if they don't have the basics. So this concept of breaking them apart is a bit silly. And so by having nurse oversight of everything that we do, which is in some other states and outside of Connecticut, that's mandated. But we really do believe, having them do the assessment, having them manage the care plan, having them be able to be a sounding board when you walk out of the doctor's office and you don't really know what does your doctor just say? I need somebody to interpret for me. Let me call the nurse. Let me actually, call somebody who can maybe help me bridge the gap of my knowledge and theirs, especially about pharmacological stuff, because I'm sure everybody knows this, but, like, if you go to 3 doctors, they give you 3 different prescriptions for the same exact thing. So, like, who knows that the doctor that you went to is the right one? So you need an advocate, right? So number one is technology. Number two, having a nurse oversee things and really have that advocate. And number three is we have 800 caregivers, right? And it's a lot of people to manage. The reason we have 800 is because everybody wants something very specific. Maybe they want somebody that speaks Chinese or Croatian. Maybe they want somebody that has experience with somebody that is paraplegic, or maybe they want somebody that cooks really well or drives or what have you. So you need a massive diversity of supply, and you need them to all be equally well trained. And so having a lot of robust education and orientation, and having a very refined recruiting process, I think, is critical, because a lot of people in this industry historically, they've gone for, I'll call it, either very young people with very little experience. Unfortunately, some people in the industry have hired people that don't have the proper work forms, if you will. There's quite a bit of, I'll call it, like, focusing on getting a minimum wage type worker into somebody's home and trying to charge the most they possibly can to get a spread on that. We actually pay, I think, 40% more than the average person in our state. And I mean, minimum wage already in Connecticut is almost $17. So you can imagine on top of that, relative to minimum wage in Florida, I think it's between $8 and $12, and Ohio's $10. So already, like I said differently, we intentionally seek out the best caregivers and we overpay them, and we're willing to take a lower spread because we believe that is a quality product and it results in superior quality. We also focus on chronic disease. And so this is more of a business strategy difference, which is we're not looking for just, a rehab person that's coming out of the hospital and needs, help with their knee for 3 weeks. We intentionally don't run after that business. We look for people that have need over the next 2 to 10 years because it creates more stability in the enterprise, right? You don't need to go, find new customers constantly. You can really invest deeply in the relationships that you have with your customers, which we just find is you know, a business perspective is just so much better than a lot of people in this business. They have to have huge sales teams. They have a lot of churn every month. So that's another, I think, from just a bad business strategy. And we very intentionally do not need to be all things to all people. So we're not running after a lot of the things that the industry runs after. There's a huge population of Medicaid, but if the margins are absolutely terrible, we can't offer a good service. So we can't invest. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to do anything where we're going to be marginal at it. But there are certain pockets of opportunity like behavioral health or brain trauma where there's different programs, autism in New Jersey, certain programs, for infusion or for wound care, picking your spots and becoming specialized and really good with those individual kind of components leads to far better outcomes. And if you're doing those things well, the markets are enormous. And so this is a sort of massive opportunity. The niches in healthcare are not really niches. They're incredibly large. So I think just to take a step back from a product perspective, it's technology, it's holistic care across medical and non-medical. It's having an intentional, very large pool of people that you pay much better than average, which is completely counterintuitive in this industry because that's not really the way it's been built. And then from a business perspective, it's very much focusing on areas of the market where they're not actually the areas that many people focus on. If you were to talk to people in home care, most of them are running after state pay because there's a massive amount of volume, but the quality is very, very low. We refuse to do anything where we're not offering excellent quality, right? And then a lot of the niches we're looking at, some of them private, some of them state paid, we're just focusing on being able to offer really, really high quality service. So you need a margin structure that makes sense. So we don't need to run after everything, but we can actually run after the right stuff and be meaningful to our referral partners and our customers and the like. And so, so that's kind of how we're different from a product perspective as well as just our strategy internally in terms of what our goals are for the business.
I really do like that approach. And the reason why I say that is because you're valuing the quality over the quantity. Most people, as you mentioned, do the opposite approach. And given going back to my personal experience, when my grandfather was in a home care facility as well, they didn't take good care of him at all. And it was very upsetting for my grandmother to see that. This was after the fact, this was after I left Florida. So I wasn't there for the whole time. I was there for maybe about 6 to 8 months. So, and yeah, it's just a lot of people put a lot of trust into these people and they think that they're going to treat their loved ones right. But what happens? They don't really. And you're taking that approach to where you're actually valuing them as a person, valuing their time, and doing the best that you could given your resources. So, one of the things that I saw was with endurance, it talks about the white glove wellness and obviously care coordination, given the technology with the AI. What exactly is the white glove wellness? Can you explain that?
Yeah. I think what we mean by that is, as I was saying, this is a luxury product. We offer private pay home care as the core business. We believe that people should get, almost like having a hotel like experience in their home, right? And so if somebody likes their, tea made or their coffee made a certain way at a nice hotel, they'll make it that way without having to be asked. Of course, that manifests in not just your nutrition and what you're eating and, what groceries you want us to buy, but it's also communication. Being a service company, we're very focused not on just communicating because you're dealing with a client who might be in their 80s. You're dealing with their adult children. Sometimes you're dealing with a guardian. Sometimes you're dealing with their concierge doctors or other doctors, hospitals. Another part of the white glove wellness and the kind of customization is every communication process is bespoke. And so
Mhm.
you want everybody to have the information flow, but it's very important because a lot of times there's difference of opinions on different things, and so that's another element of it. A third element of it is we are not just sort of traditional home care. Like we're very consultative. So like if we can't solve a problem, we know somebody that can. We're not going to charge you. We're going to just refer you to this person. They come with great experience. So, if you need somebody to clean your home or move you out of one facility and transition you to somewhere else, if you need somebody to help you look at your trusts or your estates, we have incredible geriatric care manager partners and attorneys that we work with. If you need somebody to manage, I was at a facility today, and there was somebody whom wanted their mother to age with dignity, so they have a hairdresser come in and have their nails done, and some people want massage, some people want yoga. We can customize a plan that isn't you know really replicable anywhere else, right? And so the white glove component of it is just knowing this is a luxury product, treating it as such, and that comes down to really just being a problem solver and thinking very empathetically about like if I was either the family member or the person receiving care, like what would make me happier, right? Because our actual mission is to improve the quality and duration um, of our clients' lives, right? And so quality meaning like more smiles, less pain, right? And duration meaning like you literally live longer, right? That's we can't, you know, provide you some unifying piece of data that with perfect precision that says, well, if we weren't there, they would have lived X, and therefore, we've added this amount of duration, like a pharmacological drug. There's so many cancer drugs that say we'll extend life by 6 months. We can't tell you exactly what that means. All we know is that um, when you're intellectually stimulated, which is another big part of, especially with a lot of the memory disorder stuff that we deal with, like intellectual stimulation comes in a lot of different forms. Like, I know that um, reading is something that we all, do, or watching some sort of educational television or having interesting conversations. Over time, like that actually becomes more and more challenging for people. So we have different ways to stimulate that uh, cognitive, the brain and the body. So I think, that white glove wellness is really just it's a cultural touchstone of this is a service organization. We're not just trying to you know get the lowest common denominator here. We're really trying to go above and beyond, and that goes to everything we do. If there's a client of ours that's having a birthday, it's making a big deal about their birthday even when maybe they don't expect it, or their anniversary, or the passing of their loved one, right? It's kind of treating people like you'd want them to be treated as if they were in your own family. And maybe because we're not connected to them, even better than their own family, because we don't have to resent them for being like in any way a burden, very candidly. Like a lot of families, they're like, oh my gosh, I have to constantly run over there and do these things for us. Our job is to do those things. Like we love doing those things. We make them feel good. We see their smiles. We love it. Right. And it's very satisfying. And so I think that white glove wellness is more, it's just hospitality, right? In a nutshell.
I really do enjoy that approach, what you're doing, because that's how everyone should look at the way they treat others. As I mentioned on a previous podcast, it's not how the world treats you, it's how you treat the world, right? And if you actually go into their shoes and understand this is how I want to be treated, this is how I want my parents to be treated, then that overall treatment would be a lot better. Going back on the technical side, I'm kinda surprised that you mentioned that not a lot of agencies in your kind of field aren't really adapting into the technology, even the AI as well. Because as you mentioned, it will over time save costs, save money, and that can put more resources to more services, better quality of care, better quality of life. That's pretty interesting. So given that, what kind of major trends or shifts do you see in your kind of work that would promote some uproar?
The word agency is like we never use that word in our company because we have W-2 employees. So like from our perspective, an agent is somebody who's very detached. And it's mostly a 1099 concept of like, these are independent contractors. For us, there are actual employees. We have the distinguished employee awards. Like we take it very seriously. We train deeply. And so I think just let's start with reframing it for us at least that, these are our actual employees. These are, when you go to a hospital, they don't say you're an agency, right? They just say, hey, this nurse is taking care of it. This person is taking care of it. So that is just there's an interesting perception issue. But in terms of why others don't, necessarily engage with technology, and I think, I've explained one facet of it for us, but like our agency management software is built on AI. Our uh, marketing is built on AI. Our recruiting is built on AI. Everything we did because we were able to do a clean sheet and just say, gosh, like why would we use these antiquated 1980s style, you know, DOS based software, right? I think a lot of people that have been in the industry have a ton of tech debt. They don't want to change their operating systems. It's the same innovator's dilemma that you see in so many industries. They have IT departments that are likely not going to want to change things. Most of the people in this industry are part of franchises.
Mhm.
You know, if you think about the issue with franchises, they take 7% off the top. So whatever your margins are, they're 40 to 50% lower than mine. And so rather than, take all of that to the bottom line, I reinvest it. Invest technology is expensive. When you have scale, it's less expensive per unit, but we are willing to invest, rather than invest in having, somebody else's franchise name. We just built it ourselves and we take that additional cash and we employ great people. We pay more to our staff and our team. We bring more resources to the table, and technology is just one part of that. But I think just from a structural perspective, we're far more profitable than a lot of people in the industry. Also because, we don't target things where the state has, effectively priced people out. The spread on Medicaid for a lot of states is, $2 to $4 an hour. So, for all intents and purposes, non-existent when you include overheads and any additional costs. They have no room to invest. It's not possible. They would never be able to do it. They couldn't even replicate it because they would just be losing money every single hour of the day. And so a lot of states, there are a lot of reasons for that. There is fraud. There are different things, but many of them are now so poorly remunerating people that there's no possible way they could provide great quality. I don't know how else to describe it. And so, from our perspective, it's picking the right industries and playing the right games instead of when I say games, I just mean game selection insofar as like, don't go into things where you're set up to fail, which a lot of people they don't even think about the unit economics before they start a business. And so we thought about the unit economics deeply and we said, gosh, like there's some solid economics, but like we could take a lot of that and plow it back into quality and then go for market share and just grow like crazy because we know there's 900 competitors in our state, but we're growing faster than probably all of them. And I say that with confidence because I just know how fast the industry is growing and we're growing multiple 1,000% more than that. So, it's just a matter of strategy. Don't go after things where you can't afford to invest. Understanding the competitive dynamics. A lot of these places are very legacy. They've been around for a long time. They're owned by people that are older that don't really understand technology or they don't care to understand technology. They just want to keep doing what they've been doing for a long time. And that's a huge opportunity for somebody who's going to disrupt the status quo. So, we're proud to be doing that. We're old enough to know, our team is I'll call it late 30s, early 40s. We all have 15 to 20 years of experience doing whatever we've done at this point in our lives. we're young enough to still want to disrupt and old enough to understand, that like the competitive dynamics are phenomenal when it comes to this industry for people that are willing to be disruptors.
I do agree with what you say. A lot of people in your type of situation, they're just so focused on doing what used to be done in the 80s, with the DOS, with the software system, with the implementation, everything. So they're just so used to that practice that they don't feel a necessary need to improve it and pivot. But you understand that position where if you implement the technology side, that grows exponentially, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many different factors and approaches that can go into that naturally, but it's just understanding where the pivoting is and just going from there because it's not one size fits all, right? Even not going on the individual, but also going to different, organizations as well. Every approach is different and you're approaching it in a way that should be, and especially going into, 2030, 2040, who knows what technology will be at that point in time, right? So going into, 2026, where do you want to position your company? Do you want to focus more on the technical side, the AI side, or do you want to focus on, as you mentioned, just growing and expanding the company? What's the main focus in 2026?
Yeah, look, we are hyperscaling. We are absolutely, we're building our core business, which is the non-medical home care piece. As I mentioned, we have the plan to expand into the medical side of the business as well. So that's a big undertaking. It's a completely different licensure process. There's many fewer people that do it. Um, so that's a big strategic focus. As I mentioned, we have some geographic expansion planned for 26 as well. So there's just an absolute unbelievable opportunity in terms of growth, albeit it's not industry growth, it's market share growth, right? Because
Hmm.
industry is growing, definitely growing, but it's more about, being better than the next guy at doing what we do from a service perspective, from a quality perspective, from a cost perspective. It's we have to really think about what is the customer value, how do they want to be handled, and do it better. And that's it. That's the main thing, and speed matters a lot. But yeah, we're gonna every single year expect for us to invest more in technology that is directly improving care and reducing cost. That's part of our ethos. There's no question. It's not like a nice to have, it's a necessity. Um, but I think as a industry, doctors are really skeptical of certain technologies, right? Because they're new. People want to see FDA trials on certain things. People want to also just protect their own well-being and their place in the world. They have egos. And so this is an industry that's going to rapidly evolve with technology, to be very candid with you, in terms of um, the people that are involved in the industry don't necessarily value it completely. And they, there's an irony to it. However, those same people, when they turn around and they're consumers, they all have iPhones and they're all using GPT and Gemini, and they're all, many of them are driving a Tesla and have autonomous driving. And so the irony is that with their consumer mind, they're already there, but with their professional mind, they're like, I don't know, right? But a lot of that has to do with the fact that, um, disruption is uncomfortable. And we're never going to see a world where people are just going to ask an AI bot, what's my medical ailment, and have it spit out the perfect answer, and then be able to tell you this is the PT you need to do. And you're not going to lose a lot of jobs in this world. Like, this is the only industry where we're probably in the middle of a modest recession right now, and it still grows every single day. So I don't expect it to be so disruptive to the labor force. But in terms of quality, in terms of there's so much administrative burden, dealing with insurance companies, dealing with state pay. There's so much administrative stuff that can be simplified and utilize technology more for that. And that's where we start. But imagine a scenario. just where you have, a couple hundred clients out there, and you have the ability to do monitoring of many of their homes, almost like ADT, right? Where you can, rather than security, you're looking for health related alerts, and you have a lot of people with a smartwatch on, and it's loading up certain data about what's happening physically with their, you know, heart rates and their stress levels and their sleep scores, and then you're able to have a good sense for, if you have certain clients that need more help with their hearts, you have cardiology technology associated with you. People that are at fall risk, you have certain types of fall related technology that you're utilizing. But you can do it all from a single place, and you can have, one or two quarterbacks be able to manage so many different people, and then triage and be able to send people to help for certain things. Like that's where we want the world to go, where it's like it comes to the, the white glove, the luxury market, the private pay market. We envision a scenario like I used to sit behind Bloomberg trading, I had a very good run when it comes to my hedge fund, which my brother, whom is my partner here, was my partner there. We use technology every single day, and it just, it manifests in better and better and better information, and as a result returns. And, there's no reason that can't be the case here. So as I go into 26, just to bring it all back together, like we've got, business line expansion. So like horizontal, kind of additional horizontal verticals that we're, going into. We've got geographic expansion. We've got additional technologies we're going to bring to the table. And I would expect in 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and they're on, for it to continue to be, a very similar story. And it'll just be about picking our spots and scaling. And whenever there's disruption, there's opportunity. We learn about constant disruption. Wound care, for example, there was a massive amount of money that was flowing into it. There's a huge amount of reimbursement happening from Medicare. All of that is going away. January 1st, a ton of people will likely drop out of the industry because they built cost structures based on a previous model. There's probably going to be a huge amount of volume that's sitting there that needs to be satisfied, and there might be a great business model for that. Similarly, for all sorts of other programs that happen, wherever there's chaos, there's opportunity. And that's really, if you match that up with good unit economic thinking, so that's what ultimately drives really good business results.
I agree with that. You're understanding the need and the market, and you're trying to solve the problems. I do, and I enjoyed that analogy you mentioned about the consumer aspect and how the doctors, they have all the Teslas, the Apple iPhones, and everything on the consumer side, but they're not integrating that into their line of work, the professional side of work.
Yep.
I find that very intriguing because you would think, right, going into that aspect that all facades of life are implementing technology in that sort of aspect, but they're not. And you can personally see that in your line of work, right? It is, it's not a lot of people don't understand what you do on the day to day. Like there's so much that goes into your line of work, a lot of delegation, a lot of technical advances as you're doing, and so much behind the scenes work that, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't appreciate that, right? I mean, understand, sure they see what you're doing, but they don't really see the hundreds of hours going into it, implementing the system, understanding the person.
Yeah. Look, I think our ecosystem, the people that we interact with, understand um, the amount of effort that goes into doing what we do. We often, I mean, imagine a scenario where, if God forbid, your grandfather or whatever, it's 7 p.m. at night and he has a stroke, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in Jersey, he's in Florida, my grandmother can't handle this by herself. What am I going to do? Right? We get that call quite often. Your dad's heading to the ER. He's going to be there at 9 p.m. What happens? We have to solve that problem often. We come through for people in lurch. We can get somebody in the road within an hour. We can place somebody 2 hours away from us, and have them be there, till the next morning, where another staff member comes on and sit in the hospital and be there for 2 weeks, and then go home with them and be on service 24 hours a day. And then sometimes wean them down, or sometimes have to be like that forever from that point forward. I think everybody knows that's really hard. Placing somebody on service for 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 68 hours a week. That's really hard because you have to manage all sorts of different things. And I think our referral partners appreciate that. The families that we serve appreciate that. We have a massive team internally in terms of manpower to manage all of that. And I would be remiss if I didn't appreciate every minute that they do what they do, because everybody has a different role. A lot of my role is more, I'll call it, explaining what we do, dealing with clients, dealing with referral partners, prospecting, and the like. But my brother Tom and my partner Andrew are, integral every single day. They work 7 days a week. They go above and beyond. 9 o'clock on a Friday, 6 a.m. on a Sunday. Doesn't matter. They're always there. Our all of our care coordinators, our nurse, our head of operations, who does all of our recruiting, like everybody really. I think what I'm most proud of is the culture we've built, which is a culture of service. It's hard to replicate. Um, but I mean, we haven't had any, knock wood, we haven't had a single person churn from our organization and leave us and go to another agency, as you say, or company, what have you. So I think the proof is in the pudding. If you're providing that level of quality, people want to stick with you. We don't drop shifts either. We've had like 2 drop shifts in a few thousand. That's because we build massive redundancy into our model, where 800 caregivers. So if you don't have a first primary person, you have a secondary behind that person. Then we have an office staff member that has to go out. God forbid, the first 2 can't make it there. So that redundancy is our calling card, and we don't drop the ball. We constantly, if we say we're going to do something, we do it. So I think the hard work is it's acknowledged by the fact that when somebody starts dealing with us, they rarely deal with anybody else.
Hmm.
And once somebody works with us, typically they take, one parent and then they put the other parent with us. And they're not looking for somebody else, right? They're just like, look, this is really, in this industry, it's as good as it gets in terms of the quality. And I think that stems from, like, I built a hedge fund. My brother, we started with very little. We ended up, with, $600 million capital. That experience going after, very large insurance companies, endowments, pension funds, state pensions, dealing with, the most kind of sophisticated, albeit high touch, service oriented pockets of investors in the world, and then treating our clients and referral partners as if they're those people that had hundreds of millions of dollars that were investing with us. That is very natural to me, because I believe everybody should be treated exactly, with that same amount of respect and admiration. Um, but I think, if we can bring the expectation from the financial service industry to this world, that you deserve to have somebody pick up your phone immediately. You should not be talking to somebody in the Philippines, or, somewhere where, like, you can't get in touch with the owner. You can't get in touch with somebody who can make a decision and solve a problem quickly. Like, our calling card is, um, you know, we will solve your problem, period. And so I think, I can't tell you how many times we've had people be like, thank you so much, even when we don't go on service with them, right? Where we're just trying to help facilitate getting them to another referral partner, or trying to help talk them through the complexities of how do you apply for Medicaid, or how do you think about, interpersonal or interfamily dynamics of, okay, the daughter wants this and the son wants this, but they're both, one's worried about more of the financial oriented, one's worried about quality, you know. I think all the families that go through it with us, um, we're never gonna be perfect. There's always gonna be things that come up. We are always the first to admit where we can get better, but ultimately, I think having that humility is very refreshing for them. And I think that we have uh, their respect and admiration, and we'll work hard for them every day, because that's our job, and we take pride in it. So yeah. So I'll invert, and I'll just say, like, you know once they've experienced what we do, it's hard for them not to appreciate what we do, because it requires a lot of effort. And it's certainly not just me. It's a very large group of people. uh, it's Charmene and Kagi and Joy and John, Daisy and everyone else, and they're all, um, as passionate as I am about this, they're sometimes even more passionate, to be very candid with you. Like they live it every second of the day. And so I couldn't do it without them.
That's an excellent approach. It's really worthwhile. You truly, again, are going into the weeds, understanding the person holistically, and then going from there. And especially on top of the models you have, it's excellent. I it's very interesting how you're putting a lot of time and effort into this for people who you may not even know, because you're trying to treat them like family. That's how it should be. That's how everybody should be treated. We at the end of the day, we are human, right? In some shape or form, we should treat people the way that we want to be treated. And the way we want to be treated is through dignity, through respect, and just ultimately just trying to have a better life. And the only way to do that is through the proper care, the proper resources, and just following the framework, the steps from there to implement that. That's excellent. Now, before we wrap up here, given your personal experience in this world or just throughout your whole career in life, if you can give one piece of wisdom or advice to people who are listening to this, what would it be?
You know, I taught classes at Columbia Business School. I got asked this question often. I've I've mentored people. I'm a dad, so I have thought about this a lot. And I think, despite AI changing everything all the time, I still will, I'll still go back to the same thing because I think it's critical. A lot of people, when they think about their careers in their life, they think, I want wealth. I want to generate money, right? Not necessarily because they have a reason, they might want to live in a nice home. They want to, whatever, travel. They want to do whatever they want to do, have a nice car, etc. But ultimately, they seek a salary or they seek a certain dollar threshold. And very early on in life, I don't know if it was who exactly that said it to me, but there's I'll attribute it to um, sort of being a Warren Buffett dork forever, and kind of Charlie Munger and a lot of the other great thinkers in the investment world. So much of what they talk about is it's really about compounding your knowledge, right? Compounding your understanding of very basic things. Nothing I've discussed today is complex. Understanding what it's like to be a customer and inverting that to build a business that's better than what's currently existing. It's not rocket science. That's intuition, right? That's thinking with principles, first principles. In a world where, information, the value of information is, I would argue, rapidly declining because it's just so easy. It's so readily available. You can ask GPT or Gemini pretty much anything. It's going to give you a reasonably good answer. Like my generation asked Google and that felt great. And then it was, a whole step forward of late. Um, but it's actually going to be about your critical thinking and training your, prompt ability, right? And just what type of questions are you asking? How are you asking those questions? What are the sources that, the AI is drawing upon to be able to answer your queries? My biggest suggestion to people is, rather than focusing on a dollar number and maybe optimizing when you're first coming out of school or when you're choosing your career for a certain dollar threshold, think about mentorship, think about learning. Because as I used to say to my students, if you compound your knowledge, your returns will follow. If your returns are great, your assets will grow, and then the whole process works. But if if you get lucky and you hit it big initially and you buy Bitcoin and you feel like you're a genius, hopefully you have enough of it so they never have to work again. But if not, you have to replicate that throughout your life over and over and over again to build a life, right? And so just because you get lucky once in your life, maybe early on, it actually could be a huge detriment to you, right? And so that's why you see so many child stars that ultimately have very unsuccessful or unhappy lives, because they hit it so big, right? So the real value is in reading constantly, thinking deeply, journaling, meditating. The greatest power in the world is still not in the computer. It's in the, whatever it is, 86 billion neurons in your head that have trillions of synapses that are constantly connecting and firing. And so we have such an ability to learn new things. And in the current world, where for good or for bad, if you were a computer programmer entering 4 years ago, you might have thought, man, I was in such great shape. And now they're struggling getting jobs out of school, right? Which is insane because you would think they studied the right thing. And yet a lot of large tech companies may not be hiring as they might have expected. Why? Because there was a rapid change when GPT came on the scene in 23, and now we need far fewer programmers, right? The irony of ironies, technology is disrupting itself, right? And so, what are those people going to do? Well, if they're trained to think um, very deeply and critically, they'll figure out the next thing. They could be intellectually flexible and they can evolve and adapt, and they have to, right? But now imagine that you're now 50, and a lot of people, the auto industry was disrupted many years ago. It's had a little bit of renaissance. Or, God forbid you go further back and you were working in, some sort of textiles or what have you. You know, the people that sort of thrive are the ones who are adaptable and flexible because they just learn constantly, right? And they're not so myopically focused on just learning one thing, but really they're learning many things, right?
Hmm.
And having a multidisciplinary lattice work of understanding, psychology and economics and understanding some technology and understanding, how history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And so, you can use analogs from precedents to understand how certain things might evolve. But then you also have to think from a statistical perspective, like what's the probability that it's going to evolve in one way versus another. So I think critical thinking skills are really the way that people should define their happiness and success. And obviously there's, if you have a, whatever the saying is, if you have more than 130 IQ points, you probably should sell them to the next guy. You don't need to be brilliant, but you do need to be every single day trying to learn and evolve. And that's the only way that in a world of massive uncertainty ahead of us, you're going to be able to stay afloat because everything that we knew of um, the way people go to work and the way people go to school and the way people, um, sort of live their lives. People thought it changed during COVID because we were all at home and, doing what we were doing. Well, gosh, wait 4 to 8 years and think about how rapidly technology is evolving. If you're not ready to harness that, if you're not willing to um, use the application of something wonderful that's happening right in front of us, it's going to be a world of haves and have-nots, right? And
Exactly.
the haves are the ones that are low ego, always looking to learn more. They're not focusing on the easy money today. They're focusing on the deep learning and the mentorship. Um, I think that's the difference between somebody who has, a good 3 or 5 year run and somebody who has a good 50-year career.
Hmm.
So one of the things I like about home care, the probability that Optimus Prime robots are disrupting home care is very low, right? And people are going to need, especially in the medical field, more and more and more support. To be very candid with you, it's low disruption. Real estate, people are still going to need homes. There's relatively low disruption. Whereas, I mean, so many other things, massive disruption, right? And it's everything that we were talking about. Computer programming jobs, crazily, right? Every many jobs in finance will be disrupted. The legal field will undeniably be massively disrupted. Insurance, so many things that, as we know them, can be improved and will be. Um, but that means less people working in them often, and more interaction with a computer. So you could either be the one who sees the opportunity and seizes it, or the one who just kind of thinks about, oh, I want that raise for 5% or whatever it may be, right? Which is just not long-term thinking. So think long-term, focus on learning, prioritize that over the short-term hits when it comes to, maybe if you have a job that, you get a little bit more money, but you have no mentorship, avoid that. Look for mentors. And then really, just recognize that we are in a world of rapid change. And I don't want to overstate that because people said that during the 2000s. It took 20 years to really get to where people thought they were going to get to in 5 years. It's different now because the computers are driving the computers. And so we just don't understand how quickly the S curve is working. Um, And so I think this time is going to be very interesting. So keep learning.
At the end of the day, knowledge is power, right? Money doesn't buy you happiness. You can't buy knowledge. You got to learn. You got to go into deeply understanding and gathering that knowledge. Sure, it might not take you a year, 2 years. It's probably going to take you 10 years to understand certain aspects. But as long as you keep on going day by day and learning something new, even if just a small little aspect, that's something new you learned from the previous day as to now. It's just little baby steps. And I do like that. I think that's amazing. Well, I really do appreciate your time in sharing your journey, not only in the care field, but also in personal aspects as well. For anyone who's listening or watching this, what's the best place for them to reach you at?
Chris at endurancehomecare.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'm old school in that way. I don't tweet or X or what have you all that often. I'm not really on social media very intentionally.
Mhm.
So yeah, shoot me an email. Always happy to chat. I appreciate everything that you're doing, and I wish you the best of luck with your podcast.